Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about something that completely transformed my academic life, and honestly, my entire approach to learning. How to teach yourself anything, and I mean truly anything. Look, I get it. You're staring at a textbook right now, or maybe a research paper, or some online course, and you feel completely lost. Trust me, I've been there. I remember sitting in my tiny dorm room during my first year of grad school, looking at a quantum mechanics problem set, feeling absolutely stupid, like genuinely wondering if I even belonged in academia. That feeling of being surrounded by people who just seem to get it while you're stuck on page 3 of the introduction? Yeah, I know that feeling intimately. I'd look at my classmates who seemed to breeze through everything, and I'd wonder what was wrong with me. Why did concepts that seemed clear in lecture become completely incomprehensible when I tried to work through them alone? I'd spend hours reading the same paragraph over and over, getting nowhere. It was frustrating. It was demoralizing. And honestly, there were nights when I seriously considered dropping out. But here's what I discovered. The problem wasn't me. The problem wasn't even the material. The problem was that nobody ever actually taught me how to learn. We go through 12 years of school, maybe 4 years of undergrad, and we're expected to just figure it out. But learning is a skill, just like anything else. And today, I'm going to share the exact system I developed that took me from feeling like an imposter to actually thriving in my PhD program. Now, before we dive in, I want to set realistic expectations. This isn't going to be some magical hack that lets you master calculus in a weekend. Real learning takes time, it takes effort, it takes consistent practice over weeks and months. But what I'm going to show you will make that time so much more effective that you'll be shocked at how much you can actually absorb when you do it right. So, let's start with the biggest mistake I see students make: passive learning. You know what I'm talking about. Highlighting textbooks with those neon markers until entire pages are yellow, rereading notes over and over, watching lectures on repeat, listening to educational podcasts while doing other things. And look, I'm not saying these things are completely useless, but they're incredibly inefficient. Your brain tricks you into thinking you're learning because the material looks familiar, but familiarity is not the same as understanding. I spent my entire undergrad doing exactly this. I'd read my notes before exams, highlighting key passages, and I'd think, yeah, I know this. Then I'd get to the exam and completely blank, because I'd never actually tested whether I could retrieve that information without my notes in front of me. I'd confused recognition with recall, and that's a fatal mistake. Here's what changed everything for me: active recall. Instead of reading my notes over and over, I started closing the book after every section and trying to explain the concept out loud, as if I were teaching it to someone else. And here's the key: I did this without looking at my notes. At first, it was painful. I'd stumble through explanations, forget key details, realize I had no idea what I just read. But that struggle, that's actually where the learning happens. Your brain needs to work to retrieve information. When you force yourself to recall something without looking at your notes, you're strengthening those neural pathways. You're literally making it easier for your brain to access that information later. Every time I felt stuck, every time I couldn't remember something, I'd mark that as a win, because now I knew exactly what I needed to focus on. Those moments of forgetting were showing me my knowledge gaps, which meant I could target my studying more effectively. Let me give you a practical example from my own studies. When I was learning statistical mechanics, I'd read a section about entropy, maybe 2 or 3 pages. Then I'd close the book, grab a blank piece of paper, and try to write out everything I just learned. Not copying, not paraphrasing, but genuinely trying to reconstruct the concept from memory. At first, my papers were mostly blank. I'd remember maybe the definition and one example. But by the 3rd or 4th attempt over several days, I could write out the core concepts, the equations, even draw diagrams showing how entropy relates to disorder and probability, all from memory. And that brings me to the second crucial element: visual learning. Even if you don't think you're a visual person, trust me on this. Our brains are incredibly good at remembering images and spatial relationships. Whenever I'm learning something complex, I draw it out. I create diagrams, flowcharts, mind maps. It doesn't matter if they're pretty, what matters is the act of translating abstract concepts into visual form. This process of creating visual representations forces you to understand the relationships between concepts. You can't draw a diagram of how something works unless you actually understand the mechanism. I use these specific notebooks, the Leuchtturm 1917 dotted journals. They're not cheap, about $25 each, but the dot grid makes it easy to create structured diagrams without the constraints of lines. And honestly, having nice materials makes me actually want to study. There's something psychological about investing in quality tools that makes you take the work more seriously. I also use Muji gel pens in different colors: blue for main concepts, red for formulas, green for examples, black for definitions. Again, this isn't about being fancy. It's about creating visual distinctions that help your brain categorize information. When I'm reviewing my notes, I can quickly scan for red to find all the equations or look for green to find worked examples. This color coding creates a visual map that makes information easier to retrieve. Now, let's talk about environment, because this is something people really underestimate. You cannot focus in chaos. I spent my first year of grad school trying to study in my apartment, and it was a disaster. Too many distractions. My bed was right there, calling to me whenever things got difficult. My phone was within reach. The kitchen was 10 feet away. My roommate would come home and want to chat. I'd tell myself I was studying, but really I was doing this horrible hybrid of work and procrastination that left me exhausted and behind. So I changed everything. I found a specific spot in the library, same desk every time, third floor in the quiet section near the window, where I do all my focused work. My brain now associates that physical location with deep concentration. When I sit down there, my mind automatically shifts into study mode. It's like a trigger. At home, I have a different space for reading and lighter work. My desk is only for administrative stuff and emails. The couch is for leisure reading. This physical separation is crucial. Your brain needs environmental cues to trigger the right mental state. And here's something specific that helped me tremendously: the Pomodoro technique, but modified. Traditional Pomodoros are 25 minutes of work followed by a 5-minute break. But I found that for really complex material, I need longer, deep work sessions. It takes me about 10 to 15 minutes just to get into a state of flow where I'm genuinely immersed in the material. So I do 50-minute blocks with 10-minute breaks. During those 50 minutes, my phone is in another room, not on silent, not face down on the desk, in another room. And I use a physical timer, one of those vintage kitchen timers that tick. There's something about the physical act of winding it up that signals to my brain that it's time to focus. I also use website blockers on my computer. Freedom is the one I use. During my study blocks, it completely blocks access to social media, news sites, email, everything. Because I know myself. I know that if I'm stuck on a difficult problem, my brain will want that easy dopamine hit from checking Twitter or scrolling through Instagram. By removing that option entirely, I force myself to sit with the difficulty, and that's when breakthrough understanding often happens. Now, the break is just as important as the work. I don't check social media during breaks. I don't start responding to messages. I stand up, walk around, maybe do some stretches, look out a window. Sometimes I'll go outside for a quick walk around the building. I give my brain actual rest. Because here's the thing, deep learning is exhausting. Your brain is burning a ton of calories when you're genuinely concentrating. Studies show that focused cognitive work can burn up to 300 calories per hour. You need to respect that and give yourself real recovery time. Now, let's talk about the long-term game, because this is where most people fail. They get motivated, maybe after watching a video like this, they study hard for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then they burn out. They fall back into old patterns. I've been there so many times. January 1st rolls around, I'd make these ambitious study plans, and by February, I'd be back to cramming before exams. The key insight that changed this for me came from Atomic Habits by James Clear. Small, consistent actions compound over time into remarkable results. You don't need to study 6 hours a day. In fact, that's probably counterproductive unless you're at an advanced level. What you need is consistency. I committed to studying for 2 hours every single day.
Not when I felt motivated, not when I had free time, every single day. I'd wake up, have breakfast, and by 9 a.m. I'd be at my desk. Some days those 2 hours felt easy. I'd get into flow and almost want to stop. Some days they were brutal. Every minute felt like an hour. But I showed up. And after a few months, something remarkable happened. It stopped being hard. It became automatic. Studying became part of my identity, not something I had to force myself to do. This is the power of habit formation. Your brain loves patterns. When you do something at the same time every day in the same place, it becomes automatic. You stop needing willpower. It just becomes what you do. Now I feel weird if I don't study in the morning. It's like skipping breakfast or not brushing my teeth. It just feels wrong.
And here's a critical piece that nobody talks about. You have to schedule your learning around your natural energy levels. I'm a morning person. My brain is sharpest between 8 and 11 a.m., so that's when I do my hardest cognitive work. Learning new concepts, solving difficult problems, working through proofs, that all happens in the morning. Afternoons are for review, for administrative work, for lighter reading, for problem sets that are just applying techniques I already know. Figure out when your brain works best and protect that time fiercely. For some people, it's late at night. For others, it's right after lunch. There's no wrong answer. Just know yourself and plan accordingly. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Failure. You're going to fail. A lot. I failed my first qualifying exam. Not just barely, I completely bombed it. I had to retake it 6 months later. I submitted papers that got rejected. I spent weeks on research directions that led nowhere. I had experiments fail. I had code that wouldn't run. And every single time, I wanted to quit. I'd think, maybe I'm not smart enough for this. Maybe I should just give up and find something easier. But here's what I learned. Failure isn't evidence that you can't do something. It's evidence that you're pushing yourself to your edge, which is exactly where growth happens. Every time I failed at something, I'd ask myself 2 questions. What specifically went wrong, and what will I do differently next time? That's it. No wallowing, no self-pity, no questioning my entire life choices, just honest analysis and adjustment. I keep a journal specifically for tracking my failures and what I learned from them. When I'm feeling discouraged, I go back and read old entries. And you know what's amazing? Problems that seemed insurmountable 6 months ago now seem trivial. Concepts that I couldn't wrap my head around are now second nature. That's growth. That's progress. But you only see it when you look back. Let me share a specific technique that's been invaluable for tackling really difficult material. It's called the Feynman technique, named after the physicist Richard Feynman. Here's how it works. Choose a concept you want to understand. Write the name of that concept at the top of a blank page. Now, explain that concept in simple language, as if you're teaching it to a child or someone with no background in the subject. Use simple words. Use analogies. If you get stuck or find yourself using jargon, that's a gap in your understanding. Go back to your source material, fill that gap, then try again. The genius of this technique is that it forces you to truly understand something, not just memorize it. You can't explain something simply unless you really get it. Feynman himself said that if you can't explain something in simple terms, you don't understand it well enough. I use this for everything now. When I'm reading a paper, I'll stop after each section and try to explain it in plain English. When I'm learning a new mathematical technique, I'll write out an explanation like I'm talking to my younger self from undergrad who hasn't seen this material before. Let's talk about resources, because knowing where to look is half the battle. For almost any subject, there are incredible free resources online. MIT OpenCourseWare has full courses with lecture notes, problem sets, and even exams with solutions. Khan Academy is great for foundational concepts in math and science. YouTube has creators like 3 Blue 1 Brown who explain complex topics better than most textbooks. Coursera and edX offer university-level courses for free if you don't need the certificate. But here's the key. You have to be selective. Don't just consume content passively. Choose 1 or 2 good resources and work through them systematically. I see students who collect resources. They download 20 textbooks, bookmark 50 websites, subscribe to a dozen YouTube channels, and then they feel overwhelmed and don't actually study any of it. Pick one primary resource, work through it completely.
Do all the exercises, understand all the concepts, only then move to supplementary materials if you need different perspectives. I also want to talk about the power of teaching others. Find a study group or even just one study partner. Take turns explaining concepts to each other. When you have to teach something, you discover very quickly whether you actually understand it. And hearing someone else's explanation often illuminates aspects you missed. Some of my deepest understanding came from study sessions where we'd argue about interpretations, draw competing diagrams on whiteboards, challenge each other's assumptions. Those arguments forced me to defend my understanding and often revealed flaws in my reasoning. Now here's something practical that helped me immensely with retention: spaced repetition. Instead of cramming everything right before an exam, I review material at increasing intervals. I'll learn something new today, review it tomorrow, then 3 days later, then a week later, then a month later. Each time I review, it takes less effort and the memory becomes stronger. This is based on the spacing effect, one of the most robust findings in cognitive psychology. I use physical flashcards for this, not apps. I know Anki is popular, but there's something about the physical act of flipping through cards that works for my brain. And speaking of physical tools, let's talk about note-taking. I've tried everything: typing notes on my laptop, recording lectures and transcribing them, using elaborate note-taking systems like Zettelkasten. Here's what actually works for me: handwritten notes, but not during lectures. During lectures or while reading, I just try to understand. I'm present. I'm engaged. I might jot down key terms or formulas, but I'm not trying to transcribe everything. Then, after the lecture or reading session, I sit down and write out my own notes from memory. This combines active recall with the physical act of writing, which helps with retention. My notes aren't beautiful. They're messy. They have arrows and corrections and margin notes. Sometimes I'll realize I misunderstood something and I'll cross it out and rewrite it. But they're mine. They're in my words. They reflect my understanding, and that's what makes them valuable. I've seen students with gorgeous, color-coded notes that look like works of art who still struggle on exams because those notes are just copied information, not genuine understanding. Let's address motivation, because this is something everyone struggles with. Some days you just don't want to study. The material's boring, you're tired, you'd rather do literally anything else. Here's my honest advice: study anyway. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. Discipline is what gets results. On days when I really don't want to work, I make a deal with myself. Just 20 minutes. I can do anything for 20 minutes. I set the timer and I work. And usually, once I get started, once I overcome that initial resistance, I keep going. Starting is the hardest part. But also be realistic about your capacity. If you're genuinely exhausted, if you've been pushing hard for weeks, take a real break. Not a guilt-ridden break where you're thinking about everything you should be doing. A real break. Go for a hike, see friends, see a movie, do something completely unrelated to your work. Your brain needs time to consolidate information. Some of my best insights have come not during study sessions, but during walks or right before falling asleep. That's your subconscious processing everything you've been learning. Here's something I wish someone had told me earlier. You don't have to understand everything perfectly the first time through, or the second, or even the third time. Deep understanding takes multiple passes. The first time through new material, I'm just trying to get the big picture. What's the main idea? How does this fit into what I already know? What are the key concepts I need to focus on? The second pass, I'm looking at details, working through examples, making sure I understand the mechanics. The third pass, I'm identifying connections, seeing patterns, really making it my own. That layered approach takes pressure off. You're not trying to master everything immediately, you're building understanding gradually, and that's actually how real learning works. Nobody understands quantum field theory after reading one textbook. It takes years of returning to concepts, seeing them from different angles, working with them in different contexts. Even experts will tell you they're still learning new aspects of subjects they've studied for decades. Let me share one more thing that's been crucial for my success: taking care of your physical health. I know this sounds like generic advice, but hear me out. Your brain is a physical organ. It needs sleep. It needs good nutrition. It needs exercise. It needs hydration. During my first year of grad school, I'd stay up until 2 or 3 a.m., eat pizza and energy drinks, never exercise, and I wondered why I couldn't focus. why I'd read the same paragraph 5 times and retain nothing, why I felt foggy and slow. Now, I sleep 7 to 8 hours every night, I eat regular meals with actual vegetables and protein, I run 3 times a week, about 30 minutes each time, I drink water throughout the day, and my cognitive performance is night and day different. I can focus for longer periods, I retain information better, I think more clearly. Sleep especially is non-negotiable. When you sleep, your brain consolidates memories, strengthens neural connections, clears out metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours. Cutting sleep to study more is one of the dumbest things you can do. I learned this the hard way. Now I protect my sleep schedule like it's sacred. I'm in bed at 11, up by 7, every day, even weekends. As we wrap up, I want to come back to something fundamental. Learning is not about being a genius. It's not about having some special gift that other people lack. It's about showing up consistently, using effective techniques, and being patient with yourself. Every expert you admire started as a confused beginner. Every paper that seems obviously brilliant now was written by someone who struggled and revised and rewrote and doubted themselves along the way. You can teach yourself anything, really. I've seen people with no background in math become competent programmers. I've seen humanities students learn complex scientific concepts. I've done it myself, teaching myself subjects that initially seemed completely impenetrable. The question isn't whether you can learn something, the question is whether you're willing to put in the consistent effort required. Start small. Pick one technique from this video. Maybe it's active recall. Maybe it's creating a dedicated study space. Maybe it's just committing